You are now live. Meeting is yours.
Thank you. All right, I would like to call the January 14th, 2025 ECI Committee meeting to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And just bear with me while I find my agenda again. Right. We do need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second, and all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Minutes approved for the last meeting. Okay, we have student travel next.
All right, good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. We have several student travel trips. It's nice to be a North Penn High School student. I know one of the things that you guys were hoping for is that we would increase the groups who are going, and I think that's happening. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the student travel items, and you can see more details as far as cost and things of that nature attached. So the first one, we have 45 North Penn High School boys lacrosse student athletes, a staff member, and 3 chaperones. They're going to be going to spring training in Kissimmee, Florida, March 14th to March 18th. We have 21 cheerleaders, 2 staff members and 2 chaperones who qualified for the National High School Cheerleading Championship, which is in Orlando, Florida. I want to go with them. February 6th through February 10th. We are also recommending approval for 5 to 10 North Penn High School Key Club student members, 1 North Penn staff member, and they will be attending the Key Club Pennsylvania District Annual Convention in Grantville, PA. I don't know where that is. Orlando sounds better. March 28th to March 30th. We also have 23 North Penn High School Health Professions Club student members and 2 staff members. They're going to be attending the Health Occupation Student of America Leadership Conference, and that's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, March 26th through March 28th. And finally, we have 32 North Penn High School Future Business Leaders of America, 2 staff members, and they will be participating in the Future Business Leaders State Competition in Hershey, PA, April 6th through April 9th. All of these different trips have different costs, many of them paid for by Parent Booster Club students. And again, whenever there's a financial hardship, there's always a plan to support those students. So again, details are attached. Any questions?
No questions on my end. Looks like a lot of great things that are happening. And I'm certainly grateful that students have opportunities. Continue to just want to encourage and make sure that we not just that we make sure that students have access. And I see that that's noted on here. So we just want all students to be able to take part in all of these great things. Okay, can I have a motion to move the student travel to action?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And student travel will move to action. We are going to, I guess, adjust our agenda a bit to ensure that our student representative can provide their update and we can review the calendar. Is that correct, Dr. Waters?
You know
would
what,
like
if
to
we
move-
can do the student report and then the presentation, and that way Haley
Okay.
can kind of jump off when she needs to, and then we'll end with the calendar if that's okay.
Okay, so we are going to move C up, student rep update, and it will be great to hear from Haley.
Hi, hi everyone. Happy New Year. I only have like a couple things. Our winter ball is this Friday, and I know a lot of students are excited for that. Also, recently the seniors were able to vote for their graduation date. between Saturday morning, the 14th, June 14th, and Tuesday evening, the 17th. And seniors chose the 17th, so we'll be graduating in the evening. And lastly, like I asked, this is just like a quick shout out. I asked like a bunch of students at school, like if they could change one thing, like about like the North Penn curriculum or education, like what would it be? And most students like couldn't come up with anything. So I think it goes to show like how hard everyone is working and just like how great the North Penn education system is.
Um, Haley, I was wondering how, just an update on the kind of like how assessments are going this year, and that kind of thing. I don't have any high school students anymore, so I don't know. So I'm adopting you. Tell me everything. Tell us all, just how the assessments are going and everything. I think one of the things we put in place last year was, and Dr. Bauer can correct me or Dr. Waters, some blackout dates as to like when assessments would occur, in terms of like not like right before a holiday or something like that. How is that going and what's kind of the sentiment around that?
Yeah, I think that the blackout days are super helpful for the students who are celebrating. I think sometimes when there's like a lot of blackout dates in a month, it can push all of the tests to be like in the same week, um, which puts a little bit of pressure on students. But I do think that the blackout days like are still important. I will say like one thing that some students have talked to me about is that sometimes the difference between a checkpoint and a cumulative grade, like it's like not made super clear. Like a teacher will be giving a test and then like halfway through they'll say, "Oh, this is actually going to be a checkpoint," which would go in like a different grade category, which is like sometimes frustrating. But I think other than that, the blackout days have been really helpful.
Thank you for that, Haley. I am somebody who has a student in high school, and I've heard the same thing. And it is the kind of thing where I feel like the vast majority of teachers are really bought in and doing, you know, applying assessments and enacting our new policy efficiently and effectively. I just want to make sure that administration is making sure to do their due diligence and follow up if they are aware or made aware of some teachers that still need a little bit more, coaching to make sure that, that they are doing what's expected and not trying to find in arounds and things like that. I appreciate you bringing that up, Haley.
Thank you. Thank you, Haley, and thank you for the report. Any other questions for Haley? Okay, we will move on then to the presentation. Dr. Waters?
Yes, okay. And I also want to thank you, Haley, for the great report and feedback. And we have the right people on this call to just make sure that those reminders are given. So we appreciate that. All right, so tonight, I'm really excited to be here with so many colleagues who support the cultural proficiency, equity, and inclusion work in North Penn. I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking that when I taught at Oak Park back in the 90s, I think I was on like the Closing the Achievement Gap committee back then. And so it's nice to know that all these years, North Penn has really been committed to making changes around this work. So before we jump into the presentation, I did just want to give you a little bit of background information. One of the things that I think it's important to note is that we do still partner with the Delaware Valley Consortium for Excellence and Equity. And even though all of our administrators can't be on our leadership team around this work, many of them still take advantage of those opportunities, learning and growing in some of those areas, just like all of us on this call do. I also want to note that tonight, you're going to be hearing from many people on our exec team who also lead subcommittees. We have 5 subcommittees that we're working on in our district. And tonight, not all of our co-chairs are here, but many of them are here, or someone is at least here from each subcommittee to kind of share out and just really talk to you a little bit about their goal work as well as areas of focus for this school year. I do want to note that all of our subcommittees are representative of all different stakeholder groups. So we have parents, we have support staff, we have special education teachers, related services, administrators, teachers, a little bit of everything. And it's really important that we have all of those different voices and perspectives on each of our subcommittees. One of the things that we do every year is really just look at who is on each subcommittee and kind of just make sure that we have the right people in these spaces to help us move this work. I also want to acknowledge our consultant, Dr. Barbara Moore-Williams. She comes to our monthly executive team meetings. She also supports the work that our Goal 1 friends are doing around professional development. And she also debriefs with Dr. Hart, who is my co-chair. We kind of oversee all of this together, and she debriefs with us on a regular basis. So I did want to give her a little shout out because she's been very helpful to North Penn and to all of us. So without further ado, tonight I'm going to be kicking it off to my partner in this work, Dr. Pam Hart, our Director of Curriculum and Equity. She's going to give you a little frame about what you are going to be hearing this evening. And also, we have several people on the call. Again, I'll quickly let you know who will be presenting. For Goal 1, we have Rachel Early and Jackie Giamarco. For Goal 2 tonight, you will hear from Megan Shoppy. Goal 3, you'll hear from Dr. Taylor. Goal 4, you will hear from Dave Yum. And Goal 5, Dr. Kukler, who just successfully defended yesterday, will be sharing. You make everybody smiles when you hear that, because those of us who've done it, we know what it's like. So we're all like, yay, breaking into a little smile for you. And Dr. McKenna, of course, is on here as a support because he also is a leader in the work. All right, so Pam, I'll turn it over to you to start us off.
Thanks for that fabulous frame. Really appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. It's really a delight to be here. Mary, if you don't mind posting the slides, that would be great. All right, thank you so much. So as Dr. Waters said, we are really honored to have an opportunity to provide a highlight of the work that we've been engaged in over the past couple of years, with a really focus on this past year and the work that we're doing this year as well. I thought I would begin, next slide, please. Although I know everyone's able to read the slide, sometimes it's really powerful just to kind of hear it and everyone kind of hearing the text at the same time. So our goal around our cultural proficiency, equity and inclusive work is that the North Penn School District seeks to develop a community that values and adapts to diversity. We strive to acknowledge, respect, understand, and celebrate the dynamics of racial and cultural differences. Through the development of our culturally proficient staff and establishment of structures that promote equitable opportunities and partnerships with families and students, our school district will create an environment of respect where all members of the school community are empowered to learn, grow, and appreciate one another. A very powerful goal, and we're hoping that as we kind of share our work, you will see those goals come to life this evening. So next slide. I always think it's really helpful to kind of ground ourselves in our school community. We have almost 13,000 students, and although the demographics for this past year are similar to this year, I just want to kind of ground ourselves in who our students are. You can see the ethnic and racial diversity of our student population. You also see socioeconomically that we have the students who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Our English language learners are multilingual learners, as well as students on each end of the learning profile, students who receive special education students and those who are identified as gifted as well. Really, even though they're kind of identified separately, there is a dynamic interplay. We have students who kind of fall into all of these categories, which makes our work even more important and dynamic. So next slide, please. To piggyback on what Dr. Waters said, we've been doing cultural proficiency work for many, many years. And in 2018, stakeholders really made a very concerted effort to take the work that had been done and really formalize the work by establishing some very specific goals to track progress and to also make sure that we were kind of staying on target with our goals. You can see the goals that are outlined here, highlighting professional professional development, really focusing on disproportionality, thinking very critically about attracting diverse applicants and holding on to them as members of our school community, and finally increasing family engagement. The work has been really amazing, and we'll be able to highlight that as we move through. One of the things that we recognized about a year and a half ago is while we have been engaged in this cultural proficiency work, there were also the special education department created a task force in 2020 to be able to set their own goals and really kind of think about ways in which we can ensure that we have a very inclusive school community. And for a number of years, the two bodies of work kind of worked parallel. Last fall, or about a year and a half ago, we recognized that it would be really important for us to come together and really merge our cultural proficiency work with our inclusive practice work to be able to see where there were overlaps and where there may be some holes as well. So we gathered a group of stakeholders last fall and then again last winter, and we recognized that one of the areas that was really missing in our cultural proficiency work that was very evident in the inclusive practice work was really around systems and structures. So if you go to the next slide, Mary, last winter, we expanded our cultural proficiency and equity work to include inclusion. And you'll see Dr. Hookler and maybe Dr. McKenna will talk a little bit about what that looked like, but this idea of thinking about the systems and structures very critically through a lens of equity and inclusion has been a really wonderful addition to our work and helped us to be much more inclusive. Next slide, please. So I just want to kind of take a minute or two to just provide an overview of our structure of our work for those of you who might be watching this presentation for the very first time. As Dr. Waters highlighted, we do have an executive committee meeting of members, and they represent various stakeholder groups in our school community. And they represent all 5 of the committees that you're going to hear from this evening. I want to highlight the fact that our goal 4, which is really around family engagement, there's been a little bit of an offshoot of that particular goal in our parents and equity group. For many years met as a very large group and had representatives from various schools just to think about ideas and activities that were taking place. One of the things that we recognized in that large group is that parents had very different areas of interest. And so this year we've made, I think, a concerted effort to really have that big piece of the pie into smaller pieces. So we have a variety of affinity groups and groups that really do reflect a lot of the diversity within our school communities represented to get together. And Dave Yum is going to talk a little bit about that. I also want to highlight that we do have this work. It's not just from a central administrative kind of lens, but each building has a task force really devoted to making sure that we have cultural proficiency, equity, and inclusive initiatives and a lens through all the work that is happening in those buildings as well. So with that frame, I would love to turn it over to my colleagues, Rachel Early and Jackie Gianmarco, who are 2 of the 3 co-chairs for Goal 1, to talk a little bit about the work that they've been engaged in. So I'm going to turn it over to you lovely ladies.
Thank you, Pam. Rachel's going to talk a little bit more in just a minute about some of the focus areas that we've had this year. Dan Minna couldn't join us today, but he's principal at Walton Farm and is also a co-chair for Goal 1. And Goal 1 is really about increasing the capacity of staff around cultural proficiency, cultural responsiveness, and inclusive practices. And through professional development, we've tried to make a really tight connection there in how staff can really support this in their day-to-day work. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the professional development that's taken place this year and what areas we've been focusing on. If you could go to the next slide. This year it has really been a focus on data instruction with an equity lens. And Rachel's going to talk in just a second about the structure for those sessions, but really grounding the work with some articles and excerpts for staff to focus on, and then bringing in the data that they're looking at on a daily basis as a building and supporting their building goals to respond to that in a culturally proficient way. Another component to our professional development sessions this year has really been responding to behavior. So providing some scenarios that might have taken place that people may experience in their classroom or building, and really talking through how to respond to those behaviors and prevent behaviors from happening. And so really that's about knowing the data, both academic and behavioral, and really looking at the data, the climate culture with an asset or strength-based mindset. And that was really one of our sessions, was really focused in on that and kind of looking at the strengths of the child or children and how to expand on that in order to see growth. So you'll see here the 5 dates that we have throughout the year, really focused around this work. And it's primarily facilitated by the building team, but our central administrators are also in buildings and helping to support the work as well on these in-service days. So some of them have been like full day in-services, others have been early dismissal days. In addition to teaching staff and instructional staff, we've also really, Goal One has partnered with a lot of our support staff groups to do the same exact work. Again, meeting with them, talking through what their needs are as a department, and then finding the appropriate times for that to happen, because they're not always, you know, have the time on the professional development days that the teachers might have. So kind of getting creative and what works for those departments. And so facilities, transportation, administrative assistance, school nutrition services, just really trying to focus on all of those groups to really build the capacity of all. I'll pass it to Rachel.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening, everyone. So I just want to highlight some areas of focus and action steps, or we can go to the next slide. Jackie did that. All right, I'm over to data. But before we jump into the data that we have used this year, we did want to focus on where that came from. So after every professional development session, we do send out a Google form to all of our participants, and we read all their responses. And so that's a practice that we've been engaged in for quite some time that we do find to be very meaningful. So based upon the feedback that we were given last year, looking for trends and patterns, we were able to come up with the theme of equity-focused data and behavior that Jackie just reviewed for us. So we will be talking about the types of data sets our buildings will be analyzing through the research. And just to highlight some of the research that we've used so far this year, since we've had 2 sessions, we're about to have our 3rd session coming up next week. We've had an article from Tyrone Howard, who was a previous keynote speaker. We've also done some work on asset versus deficit mindset. And next week, we'll be reading an excerpt from Ruthless Equity, which is from Ken Williams, who is going to be an upcoming keynote speaker for our February 14th in-service day. So just to highlight that a bit. And then we can go to the next slide. It'll provide a good image for the group. So here are multiple measures of data that our building teams are able to pull from in order to make their session align best to their school goals. And so you can just take a minute. I won't read through all of them, but they fall in the categories of student learning, perceptual, demographic, and process. And in the next slide, you can see an example of a snapshot. Again, I know we're doing just an overview, but we did want to provide specific examples. So this is an example of behavioral at the building level. And then before we move over to goal 2, we just wanted to provide some teacher examples of teacher feedback. I did reference a Google form that we utilize for all of our participants, both support staff and professional staff. You can just move to the next slide. Thank you. So you can just take a moment to look over them. I will not read them all, but I did want to highlight some key trends, just getting our teachers to utilize a broader lens for their instruction, the deficit versus asset-based mindset that I referenced earlier, focusing on differentiation of instruction, and then also just supporting multilingual learner students. All right, that's it for goal 1.
Thanks, Rachel. So for goal 2, Dr. Bolden and I lead the charge, and she is not able to be here tonight. So I did want to point out that we updated our goal this year to add the specifics of the suspension data and students being disproportionately suspended. We added that after reviewing some of our data from last year. We did a couple things, if you want to go to the next slide, last year in meeting with students in groups, particularly at the high school, to talk about what we noticed in the data. So in particular, our class cut data was significantly higher than it had been for certain groups. So we met with those students as a goal group and kind of went through like asking them very specifics as to what was going on, why they were cutting, how they were feeling, what they felt could do different to help them attend class more or be more engaged in their own learning. And we took that feedback and really looked at that to kind of make some change. Some of that feedback was used as we began to look at Night Zone and how we could support students that way. We also took a look and started some questions within our own discipline policy as to how we could change that to better meet the needs of students and better support students, because some data that the kids gave us kind of made us stop and pause as to what was going on there. And I know that, the discipline policy is now, there's a committee and people from Goal 2 are part of that committee in looking at that. And then one of the things we're looking at this year is, going a little bit further than just looking at what's happening at the high school, going down to the middle school to see what are some things there that maybe we can do to support students to change behavior before it becomes a habit. So looking at creating a mentoring program where we have some students from the high school who have changed their behavior, who are figuring it out and are doing better, go back and talk to some of the kids in the middle school that we've identified through data that might need that support and might need a little bit of coaching on how they could handle things differently from kids who have kind of walked their walk. When you look at the data for us on the next slide, what really stood out to me and our group when we talked to the kids was school start time was one of the things kids continually mentioned, time with their friends. A lot of them had different responsibilities outside of school, so they weren't able to hang out with their friends. Being in an affinity group and being part of, students who speak their language or understood their culture. Really using that rationale as to how they could move forward and what school was really doing for them in the future. So looking at that connection between high school and their future, because a lot of the kids weren't able to make that connection. And that came through very, very loud and clear to our group in these conversations. So that was kind of our piece last year. And then taking that a step further, letting the students know what we did with that and moving them, some of them who have really heard that, getting them to now go back and give back to this mentoring program that we're looking to get started in the middle schools. Another piece that we did is really taking a look at some of our course selection pieces of things. Our high school goals are aligned now, and one of our goals is to kind of change the course selection process a little bit, changing those timelines and moving them up. And part of the rationale, I guess, for that is really looking at AP predictability and our PVAS data so that we can talk to students before they leave for the summer, really getting that data into the hands of teachers. So when they're making course recommendations, they can look at that data and they have that available to them. And then kind of showing families what we're seeing their students are capable of to encourage them to try that higher course, to really go for that. So that's kind of the focus of Goal 2 right now, in conjunction with, some of the other goals.
I'm going to pause us just for a moment because we're halfway through, and because it's a long presentation, just to give the committee an opportunity to just ask some questions about 1 and 2, so that while it's fresh in our mind and we're kind of having the conversations about it, because I know I already have a couple questions written down. So I understand. I'll start. So goal 1, just wanted to note, I really appreciate the work that we're doing around asset-based mindset, especially the asset versus deficit. Would appreciate it if maybe you could send a copy of that article that you are focusing the information around Ken Williams to the committee. I think that would be, the committee would appreciate seeing that. For next year, I just had a question in terms, we are doing the calendar tonight. are we kind of set up for next year in terms of professional development, continuing to make sure that we have the days that we have allotted for professional development that we, had put in back in 2020 when we said we were reiterating the commitment to the work? Do we have professional development days earmarked for what we're going to do for next year? Like I noticed there were like 7 days or 6 days, whatever that you just noted. Are those in place? That was one of my questions. And then Rachel in particular, I just wanted to say I had a chance to attend the diversity, the World Cafe the other evening. And one of the parents there was talking about how much she had seen a change in the literature that was available now at the high school in particular. We actually had a conversation about it because I said I remember when it was just one thing and the work that's been done. And so I really just wanted to, it's nice when you can see your work come to fruition. And I know you really, really worked hard on that. And I know you continue to work. I know like each year you're continuing to work hard. So I wanted to thank you for that work and just acknowledge it because it is really hard work on you and the teachers to prepare, to think about doing new novels and that kind of thing that are more representative of all of our students. And that's great for all of our students. So I wanted to just acknowledge that, ask the question about the PD days as well. And the PD days might be Jackie, maybe?
Yes, so I can jump in. So that's definitely part of the conversation as we're planning the calendar, is making sure that we have, the time allotted. And while we may not have on what specific day it's occurring yet until the calendar gets finalized, that's definitely continues to be a priority when we're thinking about, the days for next year. So absolutely.
Then my only question, thank you, Jackie, I appreciate that. Then I'm going to defer to I'm sure that especially Mr. McBain probably has course selection questions. Specifically around the AP classes and course selection. I can appreciate, I think it's good that we're looking at the course selection process. I understand that PVAS data is a data point that we can use and PSSAs are a data point that we can use. I hope that it's not the only data point that we are using, especially coming off of talking about having an asset-based mindset, right? That is not the only data I hope that we are using to determine if students can take an AP class. And then I also was wondering for students who maybe it's their first AP class or something like that, like what supports do we have in place to just like help make sure that they, that they feel supported, that they know what that's going to look like, that they, know how to navigate the amount of work that it's going to be if they've never taken an AP class. Mr. McBain can totally speak more to this, but I do have a question about those two things around AP classes. Other data points that are used that are not just teacher recommendation / PVAS and how we help support students. And I'm not sure who, maybe Dr. Nicholson, maybe whoever would like to chime in on that.
Sure, I can chime in on that, and Mrs. Shoppy can clean it up if she needs to, as she's currently at the high school. But I will say absolutely, there are multiple data points that are used during course selection. PVAS is a data point, and typically PVAS really gives a good idea of what students are capable of outside of some of the other factors that are going on. So we do lean on that at times. We also, when we are talking with students about bumping up a level, put supports in for them. We have teachers that serve as mentors, and we work with counselors to make sure that we're meeting with students, that we're putting safety nets in during night zone so students have folks to meet with to make sure that they're really thriving in those higher level courses when they select them. So to answer your question, yes, we don't just rely on a couple of data points. We look at everything throughout the years, what we know students are capable of, and we always try to make them understand that they're capable in most cases of more than they believe they can be, with having those safety nets and supports in to make sure they're supported when they do make that jump.
And I would just jump in as somebody who does talk to some of the kids about this. When they are nervous or they're like, I'm not sure I can do this, we usually like sit and talk to them about what they're worried about and then create a plan with them often involves their family and what supports those students need and what they're worried about so that we can make sure that we're supporting them through the process and kind of moving forward how we get them there. So again, we do not only use AP predictability, PVAS data, testing scores. It's really looking at who these kids are and why they're not taking them and what do we need to teach them to get them to that next level and working with them on that. So that's been something we've really started, I would say, in the last couple of years to really hone in on with kids.
I think my ask from goal 2 also would be if we can provide, the committee usually does ask for the AP data each year. So if we could be sent that data as well, you know, how many students are taking the different types of AP classes, and kind of what that, you know, looks like demographically as well.
I can work on getting that for you. Yes.
Mr. Fusco or Mr. McBain, questions about goal 1 or 2?
Dr. G, could I just interject real
Oh,
quick?
sorry. Yes, Dr. Bauer.
No, that's okay. Mrs. Shoppy, you're probably the right person to ask this question, but it's my understanding that the AP predictability is actually used as a measure to catch kids who didn't sign up for an AP course. So, of course, you have teacher recommendations, you have student requests, you have grades, you have other testing data points like PSAT, SAT, Keystone exams, all those things. Final exams from prior courses, but the AP predictability can help us identify students who maybe are, from a data standpoint, predicted to be successful in an AP course, and they're not taking any. And reaching out to those kids to say, hey, you could be successful here, and here's why. So it is never to say a student can't be successful. Rather, it's to identify kids who aren't taking classes who could be. Is that right, Megan?
Absolutely correct. Yes. And that's pretty much how we do it. I think improving the course timeline helps us have those conversations before the kids leave for the summer. So it's not a phone call, it's a sit down meeting. It's a what do you need to be successful? We think you can be successful, and let's kind of encourage them to take that class or give it a shot. That's really what the AP predictability piece helps us narrow down as to who we should be focusing on.
Can I just
Mr.
put
Fusco?
it out there? Yeah, it's real quick. I think Tim probably has a lot more to say on this. And you kind of preempted something I was going to say. But it leaves me with this question. Anecdotally, as I like to do, both of my children were in the gifted program in the district and have taken AP. Well, my daughter did, and I'm sure my son will. They also have both were opt-out students. Right, so there is no PBOS data really on them. So I'm glad to hear that it's not prohibitive in any way. But you know, even though that's maybe a small population of students in the district, I just want to make sure, is our radar up on those students as well? Because when they are absolutely need to be. We look at small groups. This is conversations about small groups of students. I just want to make sure that we're thinking of all of them as we move forward with these procedures.
Yeah, I pointed out those two pieces, but we use a lot of different measures to really look at students who should be taking these courses and aren't, and why not, and trying to encourage students to give it a shot.
All right, I've been played up as if I have all the questions here, and I really don't, folks. I appreciate your work. And I wanted to mention how difficult it is to find good information in the first place, right? So AP is provided by the College Board. The College Board will often send school districts information, a list of students, and then behind every student's name, a graph filled with every AP course offered by the company, with check marks next to the names of students who they feel would probably do well in that course. And I've seen those measures for my own students of all track levels at all over the past several years. And, you know, the College Board is sending that information as a result of being a company that benefits from more students taking their courses and fulfilling various requirements and taking their tests and their assessments, things like that. So, you know, it's really important that we're leaning on information that is student specific and student centered, not from necessarily outside companies, but those accredited, information gathering organizations. And teachers are obviously an important part of that. have we considered at any time allowing students in 9th and 10th grades, particularly, as they begin to kind of narrow their focus in their course selection, have we allowed those students to um, have a taste, so to speak, of the courses that they might be choosing? So is there, during the course selection process, is there a time when a student, say in 10th grade, can spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes in another classroom during their social studies class if they're looking ahead at their, junior year class selection? I know that's logistically a nightmare, but perhaps the schedule allows it. Is there also a time when students can go and ask questions of the teachers who typically teach those classes, right? Hi, Mr. Such and Such. I'm coming from Mrs. Such and Such's 10th grade class. Would I be able to see the last assignment you guys did to take a look and see what that looks like? So what opportunities do we have for students to sort of self-advocate and continue to look ahead for themselves and help them make their own choices too? Thanks.
Who would like to speak to that?
So, Haley, were you going to speak to that specifically, your experience?
Yeah, I was a little
Go-
bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so with my experience, like as a ninth grader, I was able to go to the high school in the morning, which I think really helped me like with the shift between ninth and tenth grade. But something that I found super helpful during course selection was I was in the gifted program and I took the gifted seminar class. And Mr. Pichero was my teacher, and he arranged for us to have a meeting with like current 10th grade students. And they got to like tell us all about the classes that they were taking, and we got to ask questions about specific courses. And I think that was definitely like what really helped me start to plan out my academic like career. I do think that if we could maybe expand that beyond just the gifted seminar class, that would be super helpful to students. And then also, I am going to hop off now. So thank you guys so much and have a great evening.
Haley,
Haley,
thank you so
you.
much. That's great
Thanks,
feedback.
Haley.
Yeah, great feedback on that.
Best
Haley.
student rep ever.
I was just thinking that. I'm so fortunate that we have her. She's amazing.
Dr.
Thank you.
Nicholson?
Yeah, I'll piggyback, although Haley did a phenomenal job. I can say this is probably one area where we can continue to expand. However, throughout the course of years, we have had pockets of opportunity for students to visit with teachers, to visit classes, to take a look at that. We've specifically narrowed it down to the folks and to the students that maybe haven't taken an honors or an AP course that were thinking about that. Allow them to see what the class is like, feel what the class is like, speak to the teacher. It is probably an area, and we can start talking about that, how we can expand that to more students. But it is certainly something that we've done in the past.
And thanks
and
for that.
continue to do, I should say.
Yeah, I know logistically that can be an absolute nightmare, especially for trying to empower our ninth graders who aren't in the building to have that same experience. So I love the fact that you guys would take a look at that, and any small steps would be appreciated, I think.
My only other note regarding goal 2 is that while we are talking about AP classes and those types of things, that just remembering that there are students who are not going to take AP classes, and we're still responsible for making sure that those students have a pathway to what their next step is. I happen to have a niece who wants to be an ultrasound tech. Like that is what she wants to do. She wants to see the babies and be, well, you can go to a Montco program for that. You do not need to go to a 4-year college and get $150,000 in debt to be an ultrasound tech. And she may, change her path or something because she's a 9th grader right now, but this is what she thinks she wants. And so just continuing to kind of, I'd like to see that goal also expanded to really think about all of the students beyond those who, we want more students taking AP classes, but like, how are we ensuring that our students have equitable access to the planning of their future, what their path is going to look like, and what systems, I think one of the, I can't remember who was talking about systems and structures, that we added on to a goal around systems and structures. I love that we did that. What are the systems and structures that are part of the course selection process that will help ensure that kids have a pathway? They know if they want to take dual enrollment classes at Monco. My kids went into college and they're already sophomores at this point after their first semester because of dual enrollment. So I just want to make sure that we expand beyond kind of what Mr. Fusco was saying, like, and Haley was saying, we want to expand these things that are happening really well, but make sure that we are including as many students as we possibly can, including dual exceptional students as well. And I see Mr. Shop or Dr. Nicholson and Miss Shope. Am I pronouncing your name right? Shope or Shope?
Shoppy, but don't worry about it.
Shoppy.
However is
Okay.
fine. I'm good.
No, names are important. Shoppy, Miss Shoppe. If you were going to chime in on that, I think.
I was just going to say, I kind of glanced over it, but one of the things we really focused on is making sure kids who were identifying that they didn't see that connection to their future got in contact with our future plan center and really working to make sure those kids have that future goal and that, really hooking them up with a program and having Mr. Fry kind of dig in and work with them a little bit more than our other kids. So we are doing that kind of along those lines because we were noticing that came up a lot from certain kids. And they just didn't see a future plan.
Great. I'm
And
glad that we're
I'm-
utilizing that. Yes. And
I'm
yes.
just going to lower my hand because Mrs. Shoppy did a great job of covering what I was just about to say.
Okay. Great. I think we've done a great job of covering goals 1 and 2. I appreciate the pause for a moment because I was not going to be able to remember all the wonderful things that goal 1 and 2 said, and be able to ask those questions. So I think we're moving on now to goal 3. We can put the presentation back up.
All right, thank you, Dr. G. Nick Taylor, I'm the co-chair with Dr. Mia Kim, who is the Director of Human Resources on Goal 3. And so Goal 3 is about increasing the recruitment and retention of diverse staff here at North Penn School District. Could we go to the next slide, please? So like Dr. Hart referenced earlier, our student demographic has grown more diverse. And so there's a body of research, right, that discusses the importance of allowing for student populations to have some cultural synchronicity or matching with the staff. So like the student to teacher or student to staff populations, the more they mirror, the more that we see positive educational outcomes for all students. And so with that in mind, and with our the equity work that we do here in the district, it's really important with goal 3 that we focus on trying to increase the recruitment of diverse staff. So we attend fairs and also recruitment fairs, especially the DVCEE, which is the Delaware Valley Consortium of Equity and Excellence, who hold fairs, as well as MCIU. When they hold job fairs, we'll go and we'll talk about the great equity work that we do in the district as we try to attract more diverse candidates. Also, I'm sorry, could you go to the next slide, please? Also, we diversify our interview panels. This is something that's been a practice since we've started our equity goals back in 2018. And it's because the research supports that the more representative the panel is, the better the equity lens that needs to be applied with making decisions on attracting candidates, especially when they're going through interview processes. A big thing that we do also for goal 3, especially in terms of attaining diverse candidates and even trying to recruit diverse candidates, is making sure that we support the formation of affinity groups. Again, affinity groups being people with individuals of similar backgrounds or interests who can collaborate, share experiences, and develop goals and just kind of affirm their belonging within different groups. And so we've done that for the past few years now, where we've gathered the diverse staff that work within our district and have them meet and just collaborate, just discuss, establish networks, get get communication established, because a lot of times, because we're a bigger district, right? You're working in one building, we have 17 others, you don't always obviously see the other people. So Dr. Kim and I work with trying to establish those connections, get those networks going. And so we've had a couple of affinity meetings the past 2 years. So one we held in my building here at Pembroke. Then we held one last year at Knapp Elementary. And so we have one that's going to be coming up soon. We haven't finalized the details just yet, but we're going to get that set up. And then one of the big goals with that is to make sure that we're equipping within these affinity groups for smaller affinity groups to break out, and making sure that we can have staff members kind of take the lead on that. So that way they can always know who to reach out to, and just, again, augment the network of people who belong to different cultural groups, because that's the importance of having affinity groups. And again, the research is very overwhelming on how that helps with the retention of our diverse candidates, but then also how it attracts diverse candidates. We've also attended religious centers, like we've attended, Christian church and mosques, to show, the importance of our work and trying to increase representation, because we know that that's very important for external stakeholders, community members, parents, so on and so forth, as well as internal, so staff, students, etc. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is for our goal 3 work. This is what we're going to be continuing, like I mentioned earlier. Oh, something I forgot to mention, that the research is very important about grow your own. So in terms of trying to increase and attract diverse candidates to the field of education, the research shows that it's important to start within the earliest educational experience you can, the better, right? So we held an event where it was called Consider Becoming an Educator. So we had a panelist of different minoritized members of our staff who spoke to students, from student ambassadors to some of our culture clubs, to some of our students in our dual enrollment education courses, to talk about, like, why we got an education, and how a lot of times our lived experience as people of color, and how that drove us into education, to mitigate some of the, I think, the negative lived experiences that people of color oftentimes refer to in their own educational experience, to highlight the importance of why, they are a needed group, because again, the bottom line is it's all about increasing the students' educational and social experiences, and making them worthwhile. And so the more we can diversify our staff, especially because our student population is growing more diverse, excuse me, the better that is. So we're looking to host that event again. We don't have the details planned out, but we definitely will get that planned out probably around the same time that we did last year, around the April time. And for our goal 3 work, continuing to attend the diversity fairs, continuing to expand our connections with external stakeholders, reaching out to different groups, seeing how they can play a part in highlighting the importance of diversity within our district. And then also gathering more data about the sense of belonging that our staff members have, so we can use that to inform, our practices to improve their experiences. Thank you.
Dr. Taylor, how do we gather data on our staff members' sense of belonging?
So one of the things that we use now is the Hanover data that is collected, the Hanover survey that's collected. So using that data, especially with staff members, for looking at some of our diverse staff, Dr. Kim and I will be working on getting like a form sent out to get that sense of belonging. So asking qualitative as well as quantitative questions to gather that piece, again, to shape the practices, right, to improve our practices and our decision making, and how we can improve the recruitment and retention.
And has there been anything this year specifically for new teachers that are coming in the district to kind of support, I mean, I would say all new teachers, to ensure they're connected to somebody, that they, have I mean, I know new teachers typically have mentors,
Right.
but specifically have we been intentional with the new teachers that are coming in the districts? Because as we know, after, within 5 years, you're either going to stick it out in education or you're not, and that's for all teachers. I'm just wondering what we have done thus far this year, because it's January, for new teachers, and if not, I mean, I'd like to recommend that we move forward with getting something planned for new teachers, to see how they're doing, to check in with them, I saw that you had multiple times last year that you gathered. The one thing I noted about those dates was that it would be nice if they were earlier, like something in the fall, like something in October, something at, mid-year, maybe bumping them up a little bit earlier.
Yes, great points, great suggestion. And so the short answer to your question is, in terms of our goal work, we have not done that in terms of being intentional with reaching out to new staff who are diverse, but it's definitely something that we need to make sure we are more intentional moving forward. I'm sure because Jackie facilitates our induction program, she may be able to speak more accurately to that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, through induction, as you mentioned, they all have mentors, but really one of the things that we emphasize, especially in the first part of the year, is getting them connected to the right people. So we have a session where we connect them with, learning coaches and school climate coordinators, and just helping them like identify, names and faces of people that they should be connecting with. And also even just holding an administrator panel so that they can kind of get the questions answered that they have. Dr. Barbara Moore Williams comes during orientation and does a session with all of the inductees. So we can definitely look to partner and have a more tight connection with Nick and the goal committee. But I feel like, the feedback overwhelmingly from the new teachers, we survey them every single meeting, every month when we meet with them, is that they feel very supported, and they have like rave reviews for their mentors. And so I'd say that's definitely a strength.
Dr. G, if it's okay, I just wanted to add really quickly. One of the things I was hoping Jackie would chime in, because I know she does a lot with induction. It's very incredible the way that's been run. But I did want to just mention that Pam and I recently did meet with Dr. Kim and Dr. Taylor, and we were talking about the idea of, like, even though teachers that are new have a mentor, that sometimes a teacher of color also just needs that informal mentor that they can maybe check in with, who looks like him or her. And so that's something that we did in the past in North Penn, and we did just recently, I think just last week, have that conversation about kind of bringing that back so that people at least know who they can reach out to. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, and it is something we just very recently talked about and are looking to implement as well.
Thank you. That was all really helpful information. I think we are moving on to goals 4 and 5 now. Were there any other questions about goal 3 from any of the other? Okay, goal 4 and 5.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Yum, School Climate Coordinator. I have the pleasure to tri-chair Goal 4 with Dr. Marjorie Dieg and Ms. Regina Powell. Goal 4 focuses on increasing student, staff, and family engagement in cultural proficiency efforts. If you want to move to the next slide. So some of the areas of focus and action steps are, we have a family engagement series. Last week we hosted a Diversity World Cafe, as Dr. J had mentioned, and we had a really good turnout, and we were able to break into small groups and really hear parent feedback, suggestions. And so we really had a great time just being able to hear their experiences and kind of share, what we're doing and what suggestions we can take. Another thing that we do is a grandparent kinship group. We also have a book discussion, and our author parent night hosted by one of our North Penn staff members, Jamal Johnson, who was fantastic. Another event that we take great pride in is our Black History Oratorical Competition that happens every year in February at the North Penn High School. We have recently just sent out like registration forms and also volunteer signups. So that's a very big order to take on, but without all these volunteers that step up and the students that speak at these competitions, it's just a wonderful event. Another thing that we are piloting this year is our Korean American Culture Club for 5th and 6th grade students. And that'll be beginning in February of this year. This is a little bit near and dear to my heart. I was fortunate enough to be able to attend a AAPI needs assessment for Montgomery County, where I was a panelist with about 8 other parents or community members. And something that really came out from that panel group was that a lot of our students of color or of different cultures were feeling like they did not feel a sense of belongingness when it came to being in, the elementary schools and sometimes our middle schools. And so something that really convicted me to kind of start this was to kind of create something for our elementary school students, because typically we do see some culture clubs in the middle school and the high school, but I felt like, targeting our elementary school students would be really beneficial to bring students together. So we did send out a flyer and a sign-up sheet last week, and we kept the number at 30 students, and within 24 hours we had over 34 registrations, and so that was really encouraging. We were really happy to see that, and it also showed that it looks like there's a need that our students and our families are really wanting to see amongst our students. Another purpose of this culture club for elementary school students is, if this is successful, we're hoping that we can create other culture clubs. We can really hope that, whether it be staff members or parent volunteers that would be willing to step up to kind of spearhead this, it would be a great opportunity for, I really like belongingness and just ensuring that we are supporting our students and families in our community. If you can go to the next slide. So the way we collect our data is through exit surveys and feedback. And for our 2 big things that are coming up, number of participants, and also we'll be asking for feedback in these 2 events that are coming up. And I believe that's it for goal 4.
Okay, we have one more goal after this. Are there any questions about goal 4 or comments? No? The only comment that I have is that I would like, I was able to attend the World Cafe with parents last week. I thought it was fantastic. It was so well run. And of course, Dr. Barbara Moore Williams is a great facilitator, but I also really appreciated the presence of, I know Dave, you were there, like many staff members were there. And I think parents appreciated that. The facilitators were fantastic. I am hoping that we can get together a student group to for our committee to be able to do a World Cafe with. We did this a few years ago at the high school library.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really impactful, and it's helpful to keep us close to the work and understand what our students' needs are. So if we could arrange that, I'd like that to be able to be arranged within the next couple months or so at some point. And I think I mentioned that to Dr. Waters as well, but I guess that will fall within this goal. So I'm just mentioning that. recognizing the three of us are educators, we are going to need to figure out a time. And I will work with the committee to figure out their time schedule, and then, you know, we'll work with you all. But I recall the last one we did, which might have been pre-COVID, and I think it was just really impactful for me as a board director to understand and hear the voice of our students. And I'd like that opportunity again as
Yeah,
well.
I
So,
absolutely agree. I was able to attend that as well. And, you know, just hearing, you know, we had various students from across across the high school. And, you know, I really feel like it was really impactful and being able to give a voice to our students. So, yeah, I can definitely make myself available to kind of get that rolling again.
great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. And my fellow committee members, if you all can just communicate with me about what your availability might look like in terms of time. And then we can get that set up, because I think that would be great. And we can obviously invite other board members, but I specifically want the ECI. We're going to work around the ECI committee members' schedules first. Okay, goal 5.
Okay, thank you, Dr. G. So goal 5, as Dr. Hart mentioned, was a newly added one. And basically what our tri-chair, Dr. Broxterman, Dr. McKenna, and myself, what we do is we really try to look at all of the systems and structures we have in place and think about what evidence-based practices and inclusive overlays we have or can or need to apply or adjust in all of those situations. So the three of us have broken up a little bit into our subgroups, and you can go to the next slide. And these are what our subgroups are doing. So my subgroup is subgroup A. We're working on looking at the Work Together Wednesday sessions that we plan for elementary. Dr. Hart and I plan them, and our special education supervisors plan for the paras and specialized classroom teachers. So we look at those and we ensure we're thinking about an inclusive mindset. This year, we're using a book, High Leverage Practices for Inclusive Classrooms, that's informing our work. So we're really glad about that, but we talk in our subgroup because we want the perspectives of others. We also look at all of our professional development sessions, and especially those that we have opportunity for on our cultural proficiency, equity, and inclusion PD session days, to see if there's an additional twist or a different twist that we can put on it while we're still focused on our goal, but so that it's really, really meaningful for the critical work that they do supporting our students every day. Subgroup B is looking at the overlays of existing structures that we have: discipline, MTSS, supporting multilingual learners, gifted programming, and our inclusive practices, and really thinking about that we have a reference point, a toolkit, so to speak, for the specific processes and procedures that we use in each of those, so that we're considering all angles and being inclusive with those practices. And subgroup C this year lines up really nicely with our district's responsibility to create a trauma-informed action plan. So the people that are in our committee in subgroup C are focusing on how they can again, not just contribute to that plan, but really be contributing in a thoughtful way where we're thinking about inclusive practices from all angles, much more than just special education. And so that is it for group 5, for goal 5.
Questions for goal 5? They said special education and Mr. Fusco doesn't have a question. How did that happen?
I think it's a matter of, you know, I've been a part of this work, not a part of it. I've been a party to it more than anything. The work has been done by this group for a number of years now, and probably my lack of questions is just reflective of the confidence I have in the work that's being done and the results that I have seen, not just as a director, but as a parent and a community member. No, I don't have any specific questions at this time, but I do thank you all for the work that you're doing. I think now more than ever, this work needs to continue. It needs to be defended in a lot of ways. And I just appreciate the time and effort that you all have put into this, the dedication, because I do believe that, the district has evolved quite a bit in the 7 years that I've been on this board. And it is not my efforts that are the reason for that. Is those of you sitting here before me talking about the work that you do every day. So thank you.
Dr. G?
Yes, I'm
Is
here.
it I just
Oh.
wanted to let you know there is one more slide.
Oh, wait, did we
Sure,
get?
Dr. Hart?
Yeah,
Maybe
I
no.
just had one additional slide, and we've taken a deep dive. I just wanted to take a moment to share that even though we have, and we spoke a little bit about this earlier, we've talked about this goal work in isolation. There is a huge interplay between all of the work that happens. One of the things, Dr. G, that you always remind us of is like student advocacy and making sure that students' needs are being met. And so I just want to talk a little bit about just some, and you can see on the slides, I won't talk about all the partnerships that are taking place, but I do want to just highlight one particular event that took place that has like fundamentally shifted what's happened at the high school, and that is a partnership with school nutrition services. So about a year and a half ago, I did a listening session with members of the Muslim Student Association. And one of the things that came up was the students' concern that they were really not able to buy lunch at school because even something as simple as the cheese pizza, very often the cafeteria staff members were using the same pizza cutter for like pepperoni pizza as they were cheese pizza, and they weren't able to eat it. They also went on to share that like the Parmesan cheese has an enzyme that is not halal. And so students, even if they were using a different pizza cutter, could not eat that pizza. That conversation kind of evolved into students meeting with members of our school nutrition services with Melissa Frolick, and they kind of talked about just what they were hoping for. The team was so responsive to the feedback that the students gave that, long story short, we now have an entire vegetarian line at the high school with different sauces and foods, and the school nutritional service is actually working with a chef to make sure that the food is representative of the students at the high school. We also kind of prompted us to do a family survey to all families, trying to get a sense of what are some foods that we were like hoping to have in the cafeteria as well. Went to all families, translated so that everyone had access to it. And over the past year, the team has really worked closely with chefs, and even kind of going back to some of the student groups asking for feedback regarding the choices that they're making. So it feels like a small thing, but those moments around student advocacy, the idea that we are constantly evolving to meet the needs of our staff and students with something as essential as food, I think really captures the strong partnership, the commitment, and our commitment, not just to one another, but the commitment to student voice, to make sure that we're not just doing things that feel good for us, but are really making a difference in the lives of our students and families. And so I love to end on that because I think it does really capture just the interplay that happens, but also some of those informal conversations that really fundamentally shift the experiences that students and families have in our school district. And that's that.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. I think that was a great way of encapsulating the entire work. And I would say it's not a small thing. It's a big thing to a lot of families. Kudos to Melissa. Board members know and love and respect her, but I'm so appreciative. This is the kind of, when you talk about systems and structures, this is the kind of work that I'm so proud that we're doing in this district, and Mr. Fusco kind of mentioned it, that we as a board are able to have confidence in our executive group that's working on each of these goals. That is not new work, that's been in place for, I don't know, Dave could probably say he's been doing this work for 8 or 9 or 10 years, but to see how the work has grown, we are just so grateful for every single person that's on this call at 6:49 at night to share the work that you are doing. Every single goal is so important, and the leadership that you take in that goal and the place that you take it to is impactful for all of our students. So thank you, every one of you who are doing this level of work, and continue to ask yourself hard questions. who benefits from this and who does not. I think about that story that you just told, and I think it may have started as a listening session with our Muslim students, but now any student who is vegan is benefiting from that, right? Every student that is vegan is benefiting from that one conversation. So just thank you to this group. This is really important work that you're doing. Continue to do it stronger than ever. We're very grateful for the work and for our superintendent who supports the work and all of the leadership that support it. So thank you all for taking the time. We joked earlier that we had a 10-slide limit with Dr. Waters for most things, but this was just another great, I'm going to be texting my other board members saying you have to watch the video from tonight because it just will make you so proud to be a North Penn community member.
Dr. G, may I just say one quick thing, just for your comments and also to Christian's comments. I know, I think I can speak for all of us when I say how much we appreciate that. Many of us go to conferences and different places, and often people say, like, how are you doing all these things? And I'm like, well, our superintendent is a part of our executive team, and our school board has been very supportive of our equity work. And so it is a partnership, and we appreciate all of the support. So thank you. And thanks to all of you who jumped on and presented tonight. You're welcome to stay for calendar, but you don't have to. So if you want to go, have a great night.
All right, thank you, everyone. And calendar is going to be quick because we actually have all looked at it, reviewed it. And so, yes, you can just tell us about the calendar. And
All right, it's going to be really
you do not
quick.
need to go day by day.
We won't.
Has had a chance to kind of take a look at the calendar. We know how hard you all have been working on it.
Okay, so yeah, so really quickly with the calendar, Pete and I, in collaboration with Dr. Hart, Dr. McKenna, Dr. Bauer, Jackie Gianmarco, we've met with NPEA leadership. So we were able to kind of share some changes. Most of what you'll see on the calendar looks very similar to the last couple years. So Pete is just quickly going to highlight a couple of things that are a little different. And Mary, if you could put that calendar up, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Fakish. So as I've noticed here, we'll make this very quick. So there are some minor changes. Probably the largest, if you look to the middle bottom of the calendar where you see the months and the student days and the teacher days. Some of you may remember that last year, mid-school year, the legislation changed the necessity to do a certain amount of instructional hours and instructional days. So in the past, we needed to meet the 900 instructional hours at the elementary school, 990 instructional hours at the secondary level, and 180 school days. This past year, that changed to or. So it's the 900, 990, or 180 school days. With the ever competing priorities of professional development, with mandated professional development that keep coming along, we took a look, Dr. McKenna and I, at our instructional hours and realized that we could very easily add an in-service day, a professional development day for teachers, while reducing the number of student days by just one. So you'll see on this calendar, it's proposed as 179 student days, 191 teacher days, which gives us a little extra time to meet with our teachers and make sure that they're ready to serve our students in the ways that we need them to. Highlighting the major changes, there's not a whole lot from this past school year, the current school year, to this forthcoming school year. You'll see that we've continued with our priorities of meeting all of our cultures where they are and honoring their cultures with certain days off throughout the school year, some of them as professional development days, some of them as days off for all instructional staff and students. You'll notice, I think maybe one of the larger changes that we've proposed is in early January. So this upcoming school year, the winter holiday would begin with an early dismissal day on December 23rd. We would be in school for Monday and half a day Tuesday. We'd maintain the early dismissal the day before break begins. When we come back, we traditionally have come back on January 2nd. But with that being one school day, and then back to a weekend, what we've proposed is that we are going to use that day, January 2nd, as what we are calling an asynchronous in-service day. So we would take all of the asynchronous learning that our staff need to participate in during the school year. So that might be Title IX training, that might be school safety training, things that are done online throughout the school year anyway, usually in bits and chunks, and it'll be assigned on that day. But teachers and professional staff, support staff that need to have that training done, they would have from August 1st until January 2nd to complete that training. We'd like them to do it earlier and sooner rather than later. But if they do it before January 2nd, they would not have to work that day. And even if they did, they would be doing it from home. So the due date for all of that training, be a solid day of training, would be January 2nd, but our staff would be home. And if they did it anytime between August and January 2nd, they would be done for the school year. I think the next big change that we've made is in February. We have traditionally had a professional development day on the 13th. Having heard from many of our community members, we've changed that February 13th date to what you'll see as February 17th as the day off, and that is actually Lunar New Year for this school year. So many of our staff, students in the community celebrate Lunar New Year. With it being the same as our typical 4-day weekend for students in February, instead of a Friday and a Monday, it will now be a Monday and a Tuesday. Finally, I think the last real piece to kind of look at is the last student day. Right now, the last student day is proposed as Monday, June 15th. There would be one professional development day on Tuesday, the 16th. We were hoping to shorten the school year as best we could, but also knowing that even if we got that last school day to the week prior, if we have a snow day, we would push into that following week anyway. So we are looking to have an early dismissal day on the 15th with the knowledge that our fearless leader, Dr. Bauer, is committed to potentially up to 2, and if needed, more traditional school snow days where everybody would be at home and get to play in the snow and clean the snow and all the fun things we're all used to. So the last student day is the 15th with the potential for snow days, pushing that beyond into the 16th, 17th, or even the 18th. So with that said, are there any questions? I think I covered most of the major changes. Everything else is pretty status quo from the last number of years. Mr. McBain.
Thank you very much for this work. Again, I know it's really, really tough to juggle so many different factors from one year to the next, and the calendar always seems to give you something different and new and exciting as a challenge from one month to another. So I appreciate that. On the topic of that very last student day, June 15th, it's kind of like a dangling Monday, right? Especially as a half day, as an educator, just in all honesty, it gives me a little pause that you're not going to find a lot of students in class that day. If I'm honest, we might end up with a lot of families who've decided that their vacation plans can begin, and there's a lot of experience amongst teachers, I'll say. But in these cases, we won't see a lot of students in class, and of course, each family is going to make their own decision. That's fine by me. Is there any way we could try to ensure, and again, you're the expert on this, not me. Is there any way we could try to ensure that a student day wouldn't be left off to in that particular spot? I mean, if you're going to rank the number of or the places on the calendar where a student day would be seen as by students as a day that didn't quote unquote matter so much, right? That's a tough thing to come back on a Monday for a half day. And I wouldn't want to, if there were adjustments that could be made to the calendar, I wouldn't want to have that be the plan and hope that it feels better because we have snow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Mr. McBain, that is definitely, there are solutions in here, but they would disrupt the status quo in terms of whether it be an extra day the week of Thanksgiving, an extra day the week of spring break, one of the other cultural holidays that we have an in-service day on. The thought really was like we had a plan to back it up all the way to Friday, but then that same rationale comes into play. If let's say we get a foot of snow on January 15th, I'm not going to want to call a snow day because we don't want to push to that next Monday, right? So kind of the thought was we were doing all this bobbing and weaving and trying to make it work when the reality is we may not end on that Friday anyway. It may push to Tuesday or Wednesday to kind of negate the whole conversation. So I do think the calendar speaks well to our priorities and supporting our families. Not every holiday is acknowledged. That's impossible. But I really think the calendar has evolved over the last specifically 7 years or so. So if it is the desire of this committee, we could certainly bring this forward with some changes to the action meeting. We weren't planning it for next week, more for February. We can just lean on Dr. G to advise us, and then we'll highlight those changes come February when it comes before the board for a vote. So just let us know. This is kind of the status quo calendar with those changes that Dr. Nicholson outlined, but it's still up for subtle changes if you'd like.
I know there has been, I could just speak to this, probably 12 iterations of this calendar. And I know that there were, I know that there were several that just pushing to the next week was a constant conversation, which I know Dr. Bauer spoke to better than I could. With the state holding us to that 900 or 180. If we want to be able to honor Diwali and Eid and the Lunar New Year, and it's going to be, I think, really difficult for us to get to a place where we can get to Friday. And to Dr. Bauer's point, we still will probably end up with at least one snow day, and we'll go to the next week anyway. So I don't know. It's tricky. I sometimes wish the state would at some point like give us a pass on the snow days. Like it's not like you're going to have 10 of them. I wish at some point the legislature would not make you make up the snow days in some way, but that I haven't heard that there's been any talk of them changing that part of it. Dr. Bauer, you haven't heard any part of them considering that in their conversations, right? They've never
No.
talked about giving us a pass on the snow days.
No, there are some provisions. Act 80 does allow you in emergencies to use days. One thing that we haven't had extensive conversation about, maybe if we ended on that Friday, if we had a snow day, because of that legislation that Dr. Nicholson outlined, maybe we wouldn't have to make it up because we would still hit the hours. So we could look at that. Again, we're talking, like Mr. McBain said, we're talking 3.5 hours, right? It's a half of a day.
Right.
So we might still hit the target if we're able to get it on a Friday. The question would then become, okay, so where's it coming from? We got to pull a day. And it's a student day, not an in-service day, and that kind of gets tricky. But let us do a little more homework and we can come back to the group. We still do have another ECI meeting before this would go to action in February anyway, right? Or maybe not. When is the next ECI meeting, Deanna?
You're correct, Dr. Bauer. The next one is February. I believe it's that first, the 4th, February 4th.
Mr. Fusco, did you have a
I'm just
comment?
curious, and I probably should know this, but I don't. The week in the last week in November for the Thanksgiving break, where the students really have that entire week off, is any of that time used for teacher conferences?
Yes.
I think that's conferences. I think that's why
Conferences,
they
right?
have it. Yeah.
Is it all 3 days that they're used?
No, one of the 3 is a flex day, typically. So it's 2 days of conferences and a flex day,
I
typically.
mean, if I were going to have a hanging Chad type of day, I mean, maybe the 24th makes more sense. I mean, you're still going to have probably students, come or not, but that seems like that might be a trade-off. And just as a perspective, I'm just going to say this, because I don't think it's merits a conversation about changing anything, but as a special educator, continually asked year after year to work ESY, when you're spending your summer continuing to serve the district and the kids, you really have a very small margin of time in which to actually take a family vacation for a week yourself. Now, granted, our schedule is a little bit, I guess, more flexible because he does have a spring break, but those Mondays, last days, even for teachers, that can kind of complicate that process too, because, I know I personally have said, well, I'd rather just take my vacation, and find something else to do in the summer. Just as a little, food for thought from a special educator, on that. But otherwise, I think it looks good. I know this is a very complicated process, and you're always going to get folks that, think we should be before Labor Day or after Labor Day. We're ending too late, we're ending too
And
early.
just
We should have a week for spring break. We should have a week for spring break. You're never going to make everybody happy.
Yeah, and just to be
But
clear, I didn't want to make it sound like we should take away one of those holidays. Certainly, we're going to keep those holidays. But there are some choices we've made where we have days off, which are not holidays. And, I just wanted to make sure that we explored those situations. And me, I'm the last one to get into the weeds on certain things. But if as a teacher, I can see something going wrong and we can avoid it, I would, I trust you guys after a second look there. And I thank you for taking what is not really a second look, but I'm sure like a 13th or a 14th look. And once again, thanks for that, folks.
Dr. G,
And
one last idea to consider, and again, we can bring this back certainly, would be if we utilize Mr. McBain's rationale, like, can we try to get it to end on that Friday? I know we want that full week of spring break. We could utilize like Monday, Tuesday of that week as a real snow makeup day, meaning we have that spring break, and if we get snow, we would take away the Monday or take away the Tuesday. Some districts do that. That's another idea. But we can take a look at the hours, and then we can take a look at that snow day model if that is the desire of the committee. But we'll bring it forward again in February and have some conversations with you, Dr. G, before then. And then kind of February, we'll kind of present the final, you said 12 version. It'll probably be the 15th at that point. And then action in February.
I would say just preference on my end would be your first suggestion of trying to get the exception, then to say to families who kind of make plans Monday, Monday and Tuesday, you're off, and then there's a snow day, let's just say in the middle of March, and now, oh no, now you got to go to school. You know what I mean? I think that, and then I will say, we went to that full day, that full week of spring break. I think having that winter week and the week in the spring to give the kids a mental break is really important. We talk about mental health a lot. We talk about and being able to stop and kind of take that breather. I think it's important for our students, especially given the amount of work the middle school and high school. I do think having the full week in the winter and week in the spring, as Mr. Fusco mentioned, I would lean more towards the November, the 24th or something like Thanksgiving, because 1 month later, they're going to have a week off, kind of thing. But I trust that you guys will go back and look at it. And again, knowing that this is like your 5th or 14th iteration, if you can't get it to the Friday, you just can't get it to the Friday. Like, we trust that you've looked at it. And so we'll look again in February. All right. Mary, I believe we are at the point that is it for the agenda, unless there are any additional topics from anyone.
That is all we have tonight.
Okay. Mary, do I need to read the disclaimer? Is there anyone on the call who has, or like for public comment?
Hi, yes, we do have public comment.
Okay, let me read the disclaimer then. Tonight's meeting is our regularly scheduled committee meeting. In order to meet the requirements of Pennsylvania Sunshine Law, it is necessary to record the names of all citizens who speak to the committee during the meeting. To assure compliance with this requirement, it is essential that those planning to address the committee state their name and municipality. Members of the audience are asked to limit their questions and comments to no more than 3 minutes. This limit will permit time for all those who wish to speak to the committee. Whenever members of the audience exceed this time limit, the committee chair may ask the individual to yield to the next speaker. Can we
Okay,
have
we
our
have,
first person?
yes, we have Mr. Lanier. Mr. Lanier, excuse me, when I unmute your mic, you will be allowed to begin your public comments.
Jason Lanier Lansdale. I was going through this and I was like, okay, there in this presentation, they're going to actually present some data that shows the necessity of all of this diversity, equity, and inclusion and cultural proficiency. And yet you seem to be very scant on data and just sort of giving the demographics information, which is not that any of this is needed to get that information. That's sort of it is a standard which has been in known for some while, or I guess it changes year to year, but it's a standard. So what is the actual objective data that shows this is beneficial? Not the subjective one-offs in terms of people being really happy about having different meals at lunch, which, okay, that's fine, whatever. But why it is important to do these things which are stated in the goal making. That is to have teachers of different races or ethnicities or what have you is important for changing or achieving the goal which is stated in the presentation. Is this working? Because if it's not working, why are we doing it? We seem to be spending a lot of money doing these sorts of things. And if it's objectively not being beneficial and it's just a lot of, backslapping and congratulations on all these sorts of things, which isn't actually doing any marked improvement, then why are we doing it? This seems to me, and I could be wrong, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of data to support that it's nothing, it does anything except for sort of subjective one-offs on people having a positive experience on something. Are they doing better in education? Are these the goals being achieved in terms of disciplines? I would like to know if it is working, then how is this being achieved? Because there are certain things in here which I don't even understand what that means. There's some verbiage. What does that actually mean, other than it's like equity, focused data, and behavior? What does that mean? I've been asking this question for a long time, and I asked. I think it was Dr. Hart was going to get back to me at some point about one situation or one place, one school district where this sort of thing was implemented that showed a marked improvement in all of these things that you're trying to achieve. And that was a number of years ago. Still haven't heard anything. And I kind of feel like this is just sort of virtue signaling that you guys are doing here. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Dr. G, I believe you're muted.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else for public comment?
That is it.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I don't believe we have, we have student travel going to action. So student travel is going to action. And we will get just a second look at the calendar next month. And do we have any further questions? Oh, Dr. Bauer, you have your hand raised. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dr. G. I feel compelled to. The public comment seemed to imply that Dr. Hart said she would do something that she did not. And after working with her now for going on 4 years, I don't have one example of that. So just wanted to say, Mr. Lanier, if there is something that you would like from the team here, I'd be happy to get that for you. Just shoot me an email. You know where to find me. But that is all.
Can I say, well, I appreciate Mr. Lanier's interest in seeing the data. I am always interested also in seeing the data and outcomes. I mean, the things I heard us talk about tonight were mentor programs, book clubs, reviewing discipline policies, an internal look into our own data at the building and district level, looking at indicators to help understand why behavior incidents occur. Like, these are all, I mean, do you actually need a reason? You don't understand why these would be helpful for us to better understand our operation and to improve it. There obviously is data, right? And I'm certain that this administrative team that has gone to extreme lengths in the past to try to answer your questions, Mr. Lanier, has made this data available to you in some form. I have no doubt. As I said earlier, it really is important that we strengthen our resolve to move forward with this work, right? We have students right now, immigrant students, trans students, special education students that are very fearful of what is coming down the pike. And one last point, Mr. Lanier, you continually say that we are 9 Democrats of one mind and we should have a Republican join us to share in our thought process. Well, it's not just politics that the world views, that a lens needs to be viewed from the world from, right? Culture, background, identity, all of these things matter too. And they all have a seat at the table, and we just want to make sure that we're creating a platform for their voices to be heard and for their needs to be met so that they can achieve. You have to reach kids to teach kids, right? And that's what we're doing. So thank you. That's all.
Well stated, Mr. Fusco. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Bauer, for your response. I think at this time we can have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second, all in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Again, thank you for a great meeting. I hope
Good night,
everyone
everyone.
has a great rest of the week.